Hello, guys. This is Roderick Campbell again here, presenting about a current health event that I feel is very important, especially with today's society and the consistent, how would I say this, the consistent acceptance, more acceptance of marijuana. And this topic is something that I thought would be interesting to talk about because I feel that there is a lot of misconceptions and you know, tales about marijuana that people develop and try to act as if it's not as harmful as what it is, or maybe it's too harmful than what people think it is. So yeah, I decided to talk about marijuana today and the positive effects of marijuana and also the negative effects of marijuana and what it can do to your body and the effects that it has from a public health perspective. And just a disclaimer, this is not a presentation dissuading or persuading the use, or I'm not condoning the use of marijuana. I'm just simply stating the facts of what we know up to date in 2021 about marijuana and how it presents itself as a type of drug that can be a benefit and also a negative thing in our society. The outline for today's topic of marijuana will be pretty straightforward, as I will make this presentation more informative rather than me trying to persuade one side of the other, um, trying to like, yeah, you should smoke weed, or no, you shouldn't smoke weed, things like that. So I'll begin with the brief history of marijuana use and the states that are making it legal to use smoke marijuana and not just for medicinal purposes. Then I will transition into all of the positive effects that marijuana has that we currently know about today. And then after that, I will talk about the negative effects and some of the common misconceptions of marijuana use. And also added in that have stories of friends I've asked, and they're okay with me telling the story. I'll leave out the names, but I think having a personal connection to the negative effects of marijuana makes me more willing to educate people on marijuana and why it can be such a problem if you let it, if you allow it to. After that, I'll transition into some of my personal thoughts of everything that I've learned through this research and what I see the country looking like going forward. And the last thing will be my list of references that you can check out and review on your own time. Now I'm going to provide a brief history on the use of marijuana in the United States to provide context into where we are today. So starting in the 1900s through the 1920s, there was Mexican immigrants who introduced recreational use of the marijuana leaf. So after the Mexican Revolution of 1910, Mexican immigrants flooded into the U.S. and introduced to American culture the recreational use of marijuana. So this is where, it all started. This is where the joints and the weed and, use of marijuana begins during this time. And because the Mexican immigrants brought it over, the drug became associated with the immigrants, and the fear and the prejudice about the Spanish speaking newcomers became associated with marijuana. So anti-drug campaigners warned against the encroaching marijuana menace, and terrible crimes were associated to marijuana and the Mexicans who used it. So we see the prejudice from the very beginning, not even just against black people in this country, but it caused this fear of marijuana use because of the Mexican immigrants who introduced it to United States culture. During the 1930s, the Great Depression had massive employment, increased public resentment and fear of Mexican immigrants, which escalated public and governmental concern about the problem of marijuana. This instigated a flurry of research which linked the use of marijuana with violence, crime, and other socially deviant behaviors, primarily committed by quote-unquote racially inferior or underclass communities. And by 1931, 29 states had outlawed marijuana. Their long struggle for about 30 years, we get to the 1960s, where marijuana use in popular counterculture. So a changing political and cultural climate was reflected in more lenient attitudes towards marijuana. The use of the drug became more widespread in the white upper middle class, and reports commissioned by Presidents Kennedy and Johnson found that marijuana use did not induce violence nor lead to use of heavier drugs. Policy towards marijuana began to involve considerations of treatment as well as criminal penalties. And finally, in 1996, we get to the point where medical use is legalized first in California. California voters passed Proposition 215, which allowed for the sale and medical use of marijuana for patients with AIDS, cancer, and other serious and painful diseases. This law stands in tension with the federal laws prohibiting possession of marijuana. Now, as we look today in 2021, according to the Dyson map, there are 13 legal states, fully legalized and decriminalized states, which are Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Montana, South Dakota, Illinois, Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. This is a trend that is becoming more and more acceptable as the years go on. And what this says about society is that the use of marijuana isn't going anywhere and is going to ramp up. So I think it's important to understand the negative and the positive effects of marijuana and deduct any notions of and preconceptions that people have so that they can be safer when wanting to use marijuana, because it's a popular drug. It always has been, and it got a bad rep because of the fear of Mexican immigrants who introduced it in the 1900s. So providing facts and not, opinions about this matter is important as we go along with this presentation. Now, here is a list that I composed that had positive effects of marijuana, and I used this article that I found from the Medical Cannabis Network by Tara Leo, and there are about 20 positive health benefits that come along with the use of cannabis, which is the active ingredient in marijuana. It can be found in various forms, and the health benefits of cannabis is ever growing. And here are some of the benefits that Tara Leo pointed out regarding the benefits of the plant. The first one, and what I feel is maybe even the most important one, is the relief of chronic pain. There are hundreds of chemical compounds in cannabis, and many of which are cannabinoids. And cannabinoids have been linked to providing relief of chronic pain due to their chemical makeup, which is why cannabis byproducts such as medical cannabis is commonly used for pain relief. Leo also goes along to say that marijuana can improve lung capacity, and unlike smoking cigarettes, when smoking cannabis, your lungs aren't harmed. And in fact, the study found that cannabis actually increased the capacity of the lungs rather than cause any harm to it. Now, that one is a little bit up for debate, but there is a study that she used behind that. So I'm going to leave that there. If you think that smoking or inhaling any type of smoke is good for your lungs, then I just have to do more research on that. But according to this study, it has the capacity to improve, or it has the ability to improve your lung capacity. Another benefit for The use of marijuana is that it helps you lose weight, and she pointed out that if you look around, the avid cannabis user is usually not overweight, and that is because cannabis is linked to aiding your body in regulating insulin while managing caloric intake efficiently. Cannabis also has the ability to regulate and prevent diabetes. A study and research conducted by the American Alliance for Medical Cannabis has linked cannabis to stabilize blood sugars, lower blood pressure, and improve blood circulation. Going along with fighting cancer, which is cannabis is one of the biggest medical benefits of cannabis, is linked to fighting cancer. And there is a good amount of evidence that shows cannabinoids can help fight cancer, or at least certain types of it. Treating depression is fairly widespread without most people even knowing they have it. And the endocannabinoid compounds in cannabis can help in stabilizing moods, which can ease depression. And depression is something that I talked about a little bit in the mental health presentation, and why a lot of people may want to resort to the use of smoking weed because of this positive effect on it that it has in helping treating depression. Another popular benefit that a lot of people know about is the treatment for glaucoma. Glaucoma leads to additional pressure on the eyeball, which is painful for individuals with this disorder, and cannabis can help reduce the pressure applied on that eyeball, providing some temporary relief to individuals with glaucoma. Leo also states that while cannabis is commonly known to cause anxiety, there is a way around that. And taken in monitored dosage and in the proper way, cannabis can help alleviate anxiety and calm users down. Some of the other benefits of cannabis use is that it slows the development of Alzheimer's disease, which is one of many that is caused by cognitive degeneration. And as we age, cognitive degeneration is almost unavoidable. Cannabis's endocannabinoid contains anti-inflammatories that fight the brain inflammation that leads to Alzheimer's disease. Cannabis can also deal with pain linked to arthritis, help with PTSD symptoms, help provide relief to individuals with multiple sclerosis, reduces side effects linked to hepatitis C, and increase the effectiveness of treatment, treats inflammatory bowel diseases, helps with tremors associated with Parkinson's disease, and can even help with alcoholism. Now, all of these benefits of cannabis and marijuana use are likely some of things that people may or may not have known about. And for me, it's taken this information almost with a grain of salt, because this is this information is coming a lot from Tara Leo, who is the content marketing manager for the Medical Cannabis Network. And she has studies behind this, but that does not mean it's 100% accurate. And I'll revert back to the improving lung capacity aspect. So I will encourage people to continue to do their own research, but this is what I found. And I think it can help start the conversation of what people think of when they think about the benefits, actual benefits of marijuana use. Now, this is the section where I feel like the most education is needed, because a lot of people do not believe that there are any negative effects of marijuana. And according to the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, Dr. Nora Volkow, says that changes in marijuana policies across states legalizing marijuana for medical and or recreational use suggest that marijuana is gaining greater acceptance in our society. Thus, it is particularly important for people to understand what is known about the adverse health effects, and the potential therapeutic benefits linked to marijuana. Because marijuana impairs short-term memory and judgment and distorts perception. It can impair performance in school or at work and make it dangerous to drive. It also affects brain systems that are still maturing throughout young adulthood. So regular use by teens may have negative and long-lasting effects on their cognitive development, putting them at a competitive disadvantage and possibly interfering with their well-being in other ways. And also, contrary to popular belief, this is something that I think a lot of people have misconceptions about, is that marijuana can be addictive. I'm going to repeat that. Marijuana can be addictive, and its use during adolescence may make other forms of problem use or addiction more likely. And whether smoking or otherwise consuming marijuana has therapeutic benefits that outweigh its health risks is still an open question that science has not resolved. So the up-to-date research that we have in March of 2021 says that there is research that still needs to be done to see that the health risk, if it's outweighing the negative effects. And although many states now permit dispensing marijuana for medicinal purposes, and there is mounting anecdotal evidence for the efficacy of marijuana-derived compounds, the U.S. FDA has not approved medical marijuana. And however, safe medicines based on cannabinoid chemicals derived from the marijuana plant and have been available for decades and are being developed. Another misconception that people have on marijuana is its effects on the lungs. And people think that they're just because it's not tobacco that it's not harming their lungs. But like tobacco smoke, marijuana smoke is an irritant to the throat and lungs and can cause a heavy cough during use. It also contains levels of volatile chemicals and tar that are similar to tobacco smoke, which raises concerns about risk for cancer and lung disease. Marijuana smoking is associated with airway inflammation, increased airway resistance, and lung hyperinflation, and those who smoke marijuana regularly report more symptoms of chronic bronchitis than those who do not smoke. One study even found that people who frequently smoke marijuana had more outpatient medical visits for respiratory problems than those who did not smoke. Some case studies have suggested that because of THC's immune suppressing effects, smoking marijuana might increase susceptibility to lung infections such as pneumonia in people with immune deficiencies. However, a large AIDS cohort study did not confirm such an association. Smoking marijuana also may reduce the respiratory system's immune response, increasing the likelihood of a person acquiring respiratory infections, including pneumonia. Animal and human studies have not found that marijuana increases the risk for emphysema. Another adverse effect that I don't think a lot of people take into consideration when they think of negative components of marijuana use is the effect that it can have on your family and your friends. One of my friends recently shared with me a story about his family and how marijuana use was a gateway drug, for his parents, or one of his parents, and how that marijuana use essentially was the reason for the negative relationship that he had with his father. And there are a lot of people that think, oh, marijuana isn't a gateway drug, but there is evidence that shows that marijuana use is a gateway drug, for lack of better words to describe it. But I think, like with all things, if you use it too much, it can be a bad thing. And I don't want to condemn anyone who do use marijuana, because I don't think that it's inherently all bad, but it can be addictive and it can ruin families, especially when it leads to other drugs such as heroin. And seeing people have addictions isn't hard, or isn't a easy thing to cope with. So I believe that is a health reason, and why marijuana is so important, because it's becoming more acceptable in society. So people need to be more educated on the positives and the negatives and everything in between, to make better judgment as far as driving, putting other people's lives in danger, and thinking twice before they say something about marijuana that may or may not be true. I thoroughly enjoyed researching this topic because it was something that I personally wanted to learn more about, just so I am more knowledgeable in conversations about, you know, myths, or, tales about what marijuana is and the actual effects of it. So you guys can, check out these references that I used, beginning with the DISA Global Solutions, the map, where I got the legal information for the states. There is even more states on there that have legalized marijuana, but it's not fully decriminalized. And the PBS timeline for the brief history of marijuana, and Tara Leo's health benefits of cannabis, and Dr. Volkow's um, research on the adverse effects of marijuana use as of 2021 today. Overall, I thought I learned a lot, and I want to be able to share this information with you guys. So, as always, thank you for tuning in, and you guys have a nice day. Thank you.